Greetings, everybody! Welcome once more to the Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive once more into Golarion, the setting of Pathfinder? If you are ready to join me on this journey, we are going to be learning of an ancestry alien race that visits Golarion occasionally, but really isn't majorly there. But still, huge influence on the planet itself, the Yithian. I am your host and guide, Cantus Narravan Dracovin. I will lead you through a dimensional time-space vortex, taking us from Earth, here now, to Golarion. You just have to take my hand as I take us there. Please do remember, of course, leave me a little tip before we go. Make sure you subscribe over on YouTube. And of course, let me know if you've had any experience with the Yithians in the comments below. Let's get going. Golarion awaits. We have once more arrived in Golarion, and we are in the Darklands now. Because the very few Yithians that do normally exist in Golarion are here. But we'll discuss them and learn about them before we go visit them. But please stay close. We are visitors in their realm. Who are the Yithians? Is a great place to start asking the questions. But where could I learn the stats for Yithians and some other basic information? There are 3 sources. For stat-wise, either Bestiary from 1st edition or 2nd edition will apply. This does mean Yithians are a legacy content, but the nature of them and a lot of information about them, they're probably going to be okay as content in the lore. I don't see them being majorly changed by any major lore changes, even though they are legacy. We might see them in an upcoming new Monster Core kind of be returned. Hard to say for sure if we will see that or they're going to be mentioned, but again, they're basically more Lovecraftian than Dungeons and Dragons, so yeah. They're very much also influenced by both H.P. Lovecraft and Call of Cthulhu, so there's something that's a little bit based on both of those, so it is a derivative thing in Pathfinder. So just keep those in mind. And of course the other book that I do want to mention here is Whispers Out of Time. This is the big book where they talk about the Yithians more in depth, and this does based loosely on those, H.P. Lovecraft novels, Shadow of Time, and Call of Cthulhu. That's where it gets more deeper into it. So I'm going to kind of talk about the stuff from there, but keep in mind, some of that stuff could be removed. So some of this stuff could be kind of up in the air. I'll kind of talk about when it is. The rest of it will be canon. That's a Yithian. Yeah. It looks weird, it looks alien, but it's also not a Yithian. What the hell do I mean by that? It's both is and is not a Yithian, or the great race of Yith. They're intelligent, they're aliens, they're refugees from a distant planet, they have mastery of metaphysics, and they have the ability to trade minds with subjects across space and time, employing astral projection and mental possession. The race themselves is their minds. The body does not matter. In fact, the creature you are seeing right here isn't their original form. Basically, to summarize why they look like this in our little intro here, they foresaw their own extinction, the own end of their world, found a species to swap minds with, and did so. That's the bodies they're in today. They left those whatever these things are, into their old bodies to go extinct. An interesting start to your species. So let's look at them. Let's look what they look like here. This is the 2nd edition version of what appears. So they are cone-shaped. That's the easiest way to describe it. They are a, cone creature. They have 4 flexible, retractable appendages that radiate from the top of their cone body, 2 end in pincers that kind of click in for communications. The 3rd has a cluster of funnel-shaped sensory organs. That's a little thing there. Those are senses. And then they have a head kind of thing. It's got these 3 eyes on it, and it also has these tentacles. So the head also acts as an appendage because those tentacles are for fine manipulation. The big pinchers can't do fine manipulations. The head tentacles can. So their head with their eyes is also like their hand. But it also has some sensory information on the crown and the back tentacles. So, yeah, it is a very alien, strange creature that they are inhabiting now. That is their current body. As rubbery, plant-like iridescence weighs thousands of pounds. They're very hefty. They are large-sized, meaning they are like 9-10 feet tall. Yeah. And yes, they can basically make sounds, various sounds of their language with the pincers and stuff like there. So they do have a language. But also keep in mind that they do have some thought sense and, you know, basically do have a little bit of telepathy. And can theoretically speak other languages, but again, it's one of those things is, yeah, basically they speak like dozens of languages, actually. But that helps with the telepathy, too. So, because they're not tied to their physical bodies, they're minds. That's an important thing to kind of talk about with this. And they inhabit hosts of other species, but they don't replace minds. They exchange minds. That's also an important thing about their mind taking over. So, like, if a Yithian would enter into another creature's body, they exchange bodies. They don't replace them, they exchange them. And they can forcefully do this. They do have that ability. And they use it to gain knowledge and expertise from various species. We'll talk about that societally and how that works for the Yithian in their history. But basically, you have to think about it that way. Body isn't as important. And if they do mind swap with someone, and you're now in a Yithian body, you are, generally speaking, allowed a little bit of freedom in the Yithian cities, but you have to follow the rules, and you do have to share what knowledge you know. So it's basically when a Yithian steals your body and goes off and basically goes into your, whatever your life it is, to learn stuff from your place. Because it's not about infiltration, it's not about conquest, it's about learning. They're stealing your body to go there because they want to learn some information about it, study some things that are around you, kind of things like that. You over there, in a Yithian body, now in a big cone monster, you are basically able to live like them for a period of time. But again, it's probably not great to your mind, your body, it's hard to say. But eventually the Yithian will exchange it back. The purpose of this was not to replace you or get your body. They, generally speaking, enjoy their cone bodies as they are right now. They don't need to switch from their cone bodies. Talk about that. Anyway, then they remove all knowledge from you. They can modify memory. It's not perfect. So you might have dreams of your times with the Great Race, dreams of their great cities, dreams that might drive you insane. Yeah. These bodies reproduce asexually. They bud. They care for the juveniles in shallow vats. But Yithians don't really do this. Why? Because if they reproduce, the minds of these creatures are the original cone-shaped creatures, what they inhabit now. If not a Yithian. So they don't really need to do that. They don't need to reproduce into these other creatures. They themselves, the Yithians, their minds, can't increase their population. They are species that cannot gain new members, new numbers. They are a completely mental species. Now, there is a reason for a Yithian to bud, to spawn anew. Basically, they live about 5,000 years in the cone bodies. So when one is in the midst of dying, another will bud. And they'll swap their minds with the infant, leaving it to die in the old body. They believe it's too young, too immature to understand the nature of existence, and that, you know, it's a worthy sacrifice for them to be immortal, to keep going. And through these mind swaps, the Yithian can live forever. Though death by disease, accident, murder, being killed can happen. But Yithians believe this is an incredibly terrible tragedy. This is a horrible thing. So it's very important for them to preserve themselves above all. Because again, those numbers can't grow. They are at a set number. That's the nature of Yithians in many ways. Yithian history is interesting because there are some aspects of their history which are probably still true and others that are debatable. Because basically in the original lore from the Strange Aeons Adventure Path, they mentioned Earth. Like our Earth, most likely. Because our Earth exists in the same universe as Golarion. 4713 is 1918. So now, 12 years later, in the Golarion timeline, if I on Golarion in 4725, the today date, again, years go by just as with the adventures, it'd be 1930. Yeah. Think about that. Your Golarion characters can travel to Earth and it'd be 1930. Fun time. Interesting time. Yeah, and basically there's supposed to be some, like, influence of the Great Old Ones and stuff like that. The Corpse City of Riley is supposed to be on one of the Earth's ocean floors, things like that. That there are more mythological things, connecting to things like maybe even, like, stuff from Lovecraftian, Call of Cthulhu, and stuff like that. Rasputin was there. Connections to the First World were there. There's a lot of interesting things. Baba Yaga's originally from Russia. And so, yeah, whether or not this connection to Earth still exists is kind of up in the air. But let's start at the beginning. Planet Yith. We're talking about the Yithians. We're back in the old days. This is the Age of Serpents in Golarion's timeline. So this is like 10,000 years ago. And the race of Yith is super advanced already. They're an advanced species. But they've already found out their planet is doomed. They've been able to determine it. They've been able to predict the futures. Like, they've been reading stuff, you know. They predicted that, you know, basically it's the entire thing of predicting the future. You know, all the futures can possibly change. Can we stop it? No. Our planet is doomed no matter what we do. Our species is doomed no matter what we do. So, that's when they kind of reached out into the galaxy and eventually found the cone-shaped beings they would eventually replace. Discovered them. Found them. This is the genesis of the Yithians we know now because they are in those cone bodies. They had to survive. And the thing is, this was not an evil act. Basically, they weren't moral about it. They found out that these species would be a great one for them to replace, for them to enter into the bodies of. They could preserve themselves. They could preserve their knowledge. They could preserve everything that they had created. That was the important about it. And this species, as we'll talk about, was one in a position of weakness, of being basically preyed upon by another, tormented. Was a species doomed, maybe perhaps on its own. And the Yithians could replace them. They would go quietly into the night with Yith. But they were already doomed. And preserving their knowledge was for the greater good. Or greater, better for the universe. Right? But not the greater good, better for the universe. Again, it's moral quandary versus, you know, mind quandary. Hard to say which is better. I don't know if people can hear that alarm. I think it's being cut off by the stuff in the background. Cool. So, Yithians, new bodies. They wanted to restore their civilizations, rebuild what they had lost. And this is where they get into an enemy of theirs, which, again, are another type of creature, the flying polyp. What is a flying polyp? It's in a book, Into the Nightmare Rift. It's in Strange Aeons. So it has been around since originally 2012 and was out in 2016. Whether or not this thing still exists now, it's basically a Lovecraftian monster you have to think of. But yes, they apparently had been on Earth with the cone-shaped creatures. I don't know if they really are. Wherever planet they were on. Again, I do think these might have been like the things that were supposed to be in Rayleigh and the old worlds that have been kind of lost to Earth's history. I don't know. But basically, yes, the flying polyps had basically controlled enslaved, and, tormented the race of cone people. The flying polyps were their dominators, these creatures. And basically the Yithians were like, well, we have to restore our people, our civilization, but we got to deal with these things that subjugated our old bodies, that were their playthings, that they, tormented and did all these horrible things to. And flying polyps, in all their wisdom, didn't notice that the Yithians were in the bodies now, that all of a sudden these cone creatures were really smart. Whoops. So the Yithians studied their new home, their enemy, they built weapons. They basically caught the polyps off guard. Brutal battles, but short. The Yithians killed as many as they can, and drove most of them underground, and sealed them away in giant black towers. With magic, with guards, with everything they could. Once they dealt with that, they built their cities, they built their civilizations, they repopulated. They didn't really populate, but I mean, they built their population in this unfamiliar world into their society they once had. And then they began to basically look into past, present, and future, begin to predict things, to kind of go into things, develop knowledge on science, physiology, metaphysics, magical, learn great energies, dive into all the things. They basically, last time, their calamity, by the time they could predict it, it was too late, basically. By the time that their predictions, their knowledge of the future was enough to know what the calamity was, they could not save their homeland. This time, they wanted to know what was going to happen far ahead of time. So they wanted to be able to read what was going to happen far enough ahead of time. And so they did learn. The flying polyps would be a threat. First off, they learned that eventually the flying polyps would escape. They would multiply, they would return to power, they would get out, and they would basically murder them all. So basically, this is a time that the Yithians have discovered that there is going to be a type of beetle-like creatures that they can transfer their minds into in the future. So they're going to transfer their minds into swarms of intelligent beetles that are going to come into existence in the future. They don't exist now. But this is their plan. It's like, okay, when these guys come into being, before they develop any kind of society, when they've got their basic intelligence, when their beings are worthy enough, these swarm creatures, these swarm beetles, will be worthy enough for us to transfer our minds into. Sorry, we'll save our race again. Because by the time we are not going to be able to be prepared in any reasonable way to fight against the flying polyps. We will not be able to defeat them. We can do a lot to basically damage them, but we can't stop them. It might be like basically the end of both of our races otherwise. So basically being able to transfer ourselves away in the great battle will be the way to do it. But they also found out that some polyps were not imprisoned or escaped early on and are out in the universe. So they got to go take care of those. So there's those that go out and try to take care of them. That's kind of the and so that's basically where we are now with the Yithians. They don't really have enemies. The flying polyps kind of are, because again, their bodies are the old way of doing it and things, and there is some connections with Golarion and stuff like that, with some stuff that's going on there we'll talk about. And one of the great old ones that's kind of basically supports the flying polyps and would then be in a way against Yithians. Anyway, let's talk about a basic little bit of Yithian society, just so that we understand it here to finish up before I go to Golarion and talk about it, kind of getting to the back end of things here. So it's a society that is strictly regulated, managed, shared resources. There isn't a big government. There's basically smaller communal leagues, basically effectively like 4 major nation states, if you will, that have councils at the top of them, and those councils have put governors, and those governors work together between these 4 nations to kind of get things. So everything is kind of like decision-based, very rational. It's kind of got a board of decisions that's best for the entire species. They're very much so on what's best for the entire species, and they have their normal kind, and also they've got these elders that are at the top that are slightly more powerful. Technically, they're older kind. Anyway, if you break the law, normally it's going to take at least a couple decades, if not centuries, for them to judge you. Why? Because they got to deliberate. They got to understand the reason why you broke the law, what the plans are. You're immortal. They got to take that time to. It's important. If you got lesser crimes, you might just get some privilege taken away in society. You got to earn your way back. Harsher punishments, might mean they kind of do some damage to your mind without killing you. Execution? That is for all but the most heinous of crimes. Exile is a possibility too, but again, that's on that like level of like, maybe we will exile you for very heinous crimes, but that next level would be execution, and that's like, that's unthinkable. They have it on the books, but they don't want to use that. Because again, can't get more of them. They have incredibly advanced technology that does all their things. Get foods, goods, machines that do everything in their cities. They have no need for manual labor. They focus on their science, artistic knowledge based. And they do have some artistic visions, you know, science, artistic visions, knowledge. They focus on that. And only the struggle against the flying polyps has developed them weapons. Again, you will find them in Starfinder, may I note, and they are advanced for Starfinder. Because they have this technology from this time period. Now, granted, they don't have space travel, too, because they just switch their minds with people, but yeah. They do sometimes have schisms. They have resulted in battles, civil wars, but these civil wars are usually not, maybe not necessarily non-violent, but usually they do not fight to the death because, again, they don't have any extra minds. So, and the battle against the flying polyps always outshadows ideological differences. So, you know, it's not that they can't have schisms in their society and evolve it, but again, it's like, it is just reincarnate. It's basically the same individuals. So it's sort of like, as people age over the millennia, sometimes they come up with different ideas that they sometimes go with and stick with that. And, you know, it takes time. It's lengths of time. Lengths of time are innumerable for them. Eons. And the Yithians will work with other creatures. Keep that in mind. If you're willing to trade knowledge, you could go to one of their libraries. They love gaining new knowledge. But again, they are intellectual creatures, and they're powerful creatures, and if you can basically make a good trade with them, you've got a great ally. If not, you're not important to them. Not important to their gaining knowledge. It's all about knowledge. It's all about gaining experiences, knowing more cultures, knowing more knowledge, expanding. It's all about that. Let's turn towards Golarion. That's a Starfinder, Yithian. Because we can talk about Golarion. So, everything when it deals with Golarion deals with one of the great old ones, Zamindor. It's all about Zamindor. And the plot, this deals back again with some of the various other plots. Excuse me, dodging there. What Grows Within from Strange Aeons. That's when we kind of get into some of the more great old ones stuff and things like that. But yes, the inmost blot, the Star Seed. The flying polyps are connected to this. Okay. Basically, a cabal of Yithians led by elders spent time and space to transport one of their cities to the world where the flying polyps were being cultivated by Zamindor. That broke some of the minds of some of the Yithians, several of the structures. They couldn't win the war. They engineered the destruction of the world, but they foresaw Zamindor survive and land on Golarion. So they transported their city, Korth Rikius, to Golarion. The elders, who had also taken some mental damage, went insane. The city also basically could not travel anymore. The second travel did too much damage to it. They arrived in Orv, in one of the spheres, in one deep below Casmeron. The insane elders were either exiled or executed, so some may still live. And then the area they are in Orv was corrupted. The soil went and died. It was basically became more desert-like, withered due to the city kind of showing up there. The resources dwindled, violence erupted. The Yithians basically were convinced to transfer their minds again, except for a group of 15 to 20, who stayed behind to watch Zamindor. Their sanity has eroded because of the wind rids that gnawed the buildings, you know. So these 15 or 20 are still down in Orv watching things, but they're also kind of going a little crazy. They didn't go crazy like their elders did, which kind of wrecked the city. But they're basically watching over the city as the remainder of them, after conflict and problems, basically was like, we cannot salvage the city, we have to leave it. We have to transfer our minds out. Now the Yithians also do have a secret network of agents in many places. Inner Sea, TNZ, Numeria, Ziha. They win at technology from the Silver Mount, understand Samerson's ability to reincarnate. Reincarnation's an interesting thing because it basically saves part of it, but it also refreshes the mind. and it allows them to die, not transfer their mind. So reincarnation is a fascinating thing to learn. If we learn reincarnation, we could basically continue to save our minds and stuff, continue to get this stuff, but it would be less, jarring, and maybe we wouldn't have to sacrifice. Because again, they don't want to sacrifice these species, but they have to. But yes, and when a Yithian needs to leave Golarion, they contact a fellow operative who, after the minds drop, destroys basically anything left over while the host is still unconscious to prevent anything from learning the functionings of the various communications and devices that they have. So yes, because they kind of come in there, they build devices and stuff using their knowledge, and those stuff has to be destroyed, and you can't always destroy everything because they're usually connected to your transferring. But anyway, there's the Yithians, a fascinating creature that do have an eye on Golarion, because if you know a great old one, and there's the entire storyline of what's going on with what grows within in Strange Aeons, which kind of deals with some of that stuff related to it. The flying polyps, the great old one. Basically, because Zamindor is using their old enemy, the flying polyps, Zamindor has become the Yithian's enemy in a lot of ways. So of course, they're watching out for what's going on there. This great old one, this creature of the stars. It's one of those things that the Yithians have minds strong enough to withstand this battle, mostly, but we have seen it has worn upon them, even their elders. It's a fascinating place to be with. And these are fascinating creatures that, yes, there's some details that might be different now. Again, it's these things that aren't really mentioned so much, like the connections to Earth, that kind of stuff doesn't exist. Dealing with things like the flying polyps and stuff, that kinda still exists. Again, there are details that are left out, certainly when it comes to second edition, and things that are not discussed because it wasn't really needed to be discussed. And Strange Aeons does get into that as an adventure pack, but it is closer to the back end of things. That is, talking about stuff from 2016 versus when they were originally introduced in 2011. Yeah, it's 9 years ago, but again, remaster project, second edition, hard to say what's been updated. But some of the basics of the Yithians still exist. They're in the cone bodies, they replace themselves, their cone bodies weren't their original, they're looking for new ones, ready to do that kind of things, and they switch minds and investigate places. That kind of basic survives. What's going on with the flying polyps? Some of the reasons why they're on Golarion, these things, whether they still are perfectly the way they are, and some of their history probably has been changed, but where these three things are in this, we don't know now. Not until we revisit them in some kind of meaningful way. But again, you can use what you want from that bit. It's just the basics are still the same. They're a fascinating species, and I hope you enjoyed learning about these strange body snatchers, body switchers. I mean, they don't necessarily want to steal your body. They want their rubbery, nigh immortal body back, if they can. They might borrow your body for a while. And we'll leave things there. Make sure to check out all the rest of my stuff. Whether I'm live streaming over on Twitch, where I do live plays like Fall of Abysmal Wednesdays at 8, discussing shows like Discussing Tabletop Saturdays at 6, where I go over news, topics, and stuff, do gaming, do recordings of this stuff. All that stuff's over on Twitch. But if you just want to see the tabletop-related stuff, go check it out on YouTube. And if you're checking it out on YouTube, please do make sure you're subscribed. And let me know what you think of things like Yithians and Anime videos. A comment always goes a long way. But basically, that's where all the tabletop stuff ends up. Might get a VOD channel for all the rest of my content at some point in time. I do have to make that. Check out my social medias for updates on schedule, what's going on, little things, cat pictures occasionally. I do have to remember to upload a couple more. And until the next time we dive into Golarion, another world, another place, another ancestor, or anything else, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.